Radical acceptance is where you, by choice, deliberately, not by instinct or spontaneously, make a decision to accept things as they are and not as they should be. And it's very powerful and it's very active. It's not passive, like, what are you going to do? It's not throwing up your hands. It's not giving things a pass. You can still say something's wrong. You can still say somebody hurt you. You can still say you have feelings about it. But radical acceptance is where you say, this is reality, and a reality I can do nothing about. And I'll either get stuck on it and wrapped around the axle and not be able to get dislodged from that, or I'm going to practice radical acceptance, which is I accept that that is what's happened and how it is.
Welcome to another 10,000 Minutes podcast. I just said that same thing 8 times, and every time I somehow stuttered or totally just blew it, so I should do a blooper round. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to do a good one, and that one felt pretty good to me, so we're just moving right on. You guys, welcome to the 10,000 Minute Podcast. My name is Timmons, and I speak English. A little bit of Spanish, enough to get me in trouble and say bad words that I don't even mean to say. That's a story for another time, but I did it. I said something really inappropriate when I was leading a vacation Bible school in Mexico. The pastor was really angry. Anyways, so you guys, this season is season 3, and we've got one of my new friends from our church community, but he's a stud. He's a psychologist. Dave has a PhD in psychology, so don't worry about that. I mean, I do too, but I don't like to put it in front of my name. It just feels a little arrogant. But he's got some crazy great wisdom, and we had a bunch of you guys share your relationship questions. So we asked our community, hey, give us questions. So I'm asking Dave a bunch of these questions, and the answers are crazy great. And they are answers, but they're just responses that make us think even more. Dave is the director of Southeast Psych here in Nashville, and he's got a bunch of therapists and psychologists that work with him and work with them, and they're just terrific humans. And he's super wise. He and his wife are just legends. So I thought I would actually love to hear some of his answers on these. He's authored 9 books, with one of them coming out in 2025. Dave Verhaagan, we will have fun with his name in a second. We also have Chris on here and Layla. And Layla's a new friend, and I love her as well. So it's a good time. And all this stuff about him is in the show notes. So everything is in the show notes. If you want to get the free text messages, if you want to give toward 10,000 minutes, go to the show notes. I actually don't know if that's in the show notes, but everything else is. Also, what else is in the show notes is Unlocking You event. So it's our cancer survivor event that we're putting on through 10,000 minutes, just because I have so many friends in the midst of painful cancer. Some of them are in remission, they're doing well, but cancer just leaves a mark. It just does. Like, I'm in the hospital often because of just some of the repercussions of some of my surgeries, and cancer is just rough. Also, cancer patients generally don't have a lot of money because, like, I am still paying for CTs from a few years ago. So we wanted to put this retreat on for cancer patients, survivors. Again, if you're in remission or not, or in the middle of it right now, we're going to put on this retreat for all of us. So it is August 12th through the 14th of 2024. If this is after that, don't worry about it. Just skip forward 10 seconds. But if you know somebody who you'd love to send, or you just want to support this because it's really expensive, would you go to the show notes and you can find that. Also, we will be doing this more times in the future than just this August 12th to 14th. And registration is in the show notes. But if you want to give toward that or sponsor somebody to go to that, reach out, let us know. You can also just go to the show notes. That will do all the things. If you want to sponsor what we're doing through 10,000 minutes, that is also wonderful. That's how we continue to do what we're doing, because this is not cheap, nor are our text messages cheap that we're sending out to thousands and thousands of people every single week. And they're free text messages. If you want to get those, go to the show notes. And they're just encouragement. So if you want to sponsor what we're doing, go to 10,000minutes.com, and we would be honored. We don't have a Patreon, but we send out an email to the partners. So please sponsor what we're doing and partner with us. If you guys are loving season 3, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and it's helpful for us. If you'd like to join our 10,000 Minute community, you can do that on Facebook. which is wonderful. I love jumping in there. Go to any of our socials and check out the show notes below. If I can say check out the show notes below any more times, okay, that's about it. Okay, guys, here's Dr. Dave Verhaagan. I mean, that's PhD Dave Verhaagan. Okay, I wonder, so is it not doctor? Did I just blow that? Well, I will be corrected. And if you guys need to correct me, go right ahead. It was an honest mistake. Okay, here we go. Thankfully, we've got Chris Cleveland over here to my hot left.
Hot left.
I haven't been able to say that really well. This
I'm so happy to be here.
Hair's up, everybody, if you're not watching.
That is strong hair, by the way.
Mustache is strong.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
I mean, it took a while.
It took like at least 5 months, but here we are.
It's hot. Is your wife okay with that?
Yeah, I check in with her every once in a while.
Yeah, because it's worth doing.
Yeah, I do, and she's in.
Because if she's out.
Yeah, I mean that's the only reason why I still have it.
Yeah,
she said she kind of liked it. And I was
really?
like, okay.
Oh, wow.
She's pro mustache.
She's in.
All right.
I feel like it makes me look my age, which I'm battling with. Right, we can get into this here in a little while.
Yeah.
It's a relationship with myself, but other than that, I'm feeling pretty good.
Well, you look great.
Thanks, man.
And then we have a new human to my right who's a new friend of my family, and she's part of Journey Church, which we love this community. And Layla is one of those people. So, guys, Layla is in her 20s. We'll just put it that way. What else do you have to say about yourself?
Well, I wish I could talk about facial hair and
Right.
the new sort of like identities that I'm feeling with that. I don't have much to offer on that
Yeah.
topic, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
You're doing great. I think you look great.
Thank you.
It's all coming in.
Yeah. Slowly but surely.
Layla, can you pronounce your last name for us, please?
Yes. Shah Mohammadi.
Shah Mohammadi. And here's the coolest thing is that Siri nails your name.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard her.
Like I'll say,
say,
hey Siri, call Layla. And it will say, calling Layla help me.
Shah Mohammadi.
Shah Mohammadi.
That's a party trick. I'm going to like tell Siri to say my name to people.
She's nailing it. Or
Right.
whoever she is. Or
Whoever
he is. Yeah, they're
they are.
killing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like a 1950s like doo-wop song though. Shaman Honey. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of.
Could you try a song really quick?
Can I do it?
Yeah.
No, thank you. I think of all the people at the table, least
Yeah. It's
likely to
probably
do the
true.
song. Yeah.
Layla's a singer-songwriter.
sweet.
Just an awesome and a great pickleball player. Let's be real honest.
And is that the hierarchy? Pickleball, singer-songwriter, or is it?
It's kind of fluid, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it fluid?
It is a little fluid right now.
That must mean you're a pretty great pickleball player.
Yeah.
Not as good as Tim, but
Yeah.
we're cute.
Well, we don't want to brag or, But what else about my pickleball game? Anything else you can? And then everybody, we've got Mr. Dave Verhaagan over there.
Woohoo.
And you have a lot of A's in your name.
Like at least 20 in the last name alone. No, actually, it's a good Dutch name, and it is Americanized. So the name in America is pronounced Verhagen, like a little haystack.
Yeah.
But the Dutch name, and I didn't know this until I got on a boat with a Dutch crew,
Yeah.
and they were checking the manifest, and they said, Mr. Verhagen. And I'm like, what? And
Yeah.
they say, Verhagen.
Yeah, well,
that's how you say my name. Apparently, that's everyone in the Netherlands who knows of Verhagen.
You have to wear a mask. You know what I mean? Just
a lot
to
of,
say that and
lot
not.
of spitting.
Yeah. Yeah. Timmons doesn't have a lot of that. Or could. I just haven't.
But it is alliterative, which I like. It's Timmons. It's very like pow.
It is amazing the amount of times that I'm asked, is that your real name?
Yeah, it feels like a made up musician name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel that.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris, I think if you and I spit a little bit, we'd have a little spit catchers with our mustaches.
Yeah, you got to carry a little wet rag around with you, you know?
And fun fact, Chris's facial hair is real, but Tim's is actually glue on.
It's totally glue on.
It's like Mr. Potato Head.
Can't grow something that thick.
No. And this, my daughter, Malia, she literally said to me last night, she's like, Dad, I think you've got to trim your beard. I'm like, honey, I know it's out of control. And so I tried a little bit today, but I was like, I don't have time.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's what today's on.
Your beard.
Beard trimming.
Nice.
That is not entirely true. We might get into that at some point. But Dave, will you give us just a little background on what you do?
Yeah.
And we've got a bunch of questions from listeners and people that are part of 10,000 Minutes. And I wanted to throw a few of them at you and see just what can we learn together.
Good. I am a psychologist, which is different than a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. So that's a MD, prescribes medicine, all that. I don't do that. I'm a PhD and I do therapy. And so some days I might see 7 appointments in a day I've done it for 33 years now.
Wow.
Not the least bit burnout. Love my job as much as when I started it. I love my job. I feel like it's a privilege. It's an honor. So when I started, I was seeing more little ones and teenagers. And there's a point in your life where you don't want to be on the floor with a bunch of Legos. I mean, you do, but not for your work. And
Right.
then, because that's still fun.
Yeah.
But I've kind of migrated up. And so now I only see young adult age guys.
Okay.
And,
And there's one calling right now.
one's calling and they're telling
Can
me
you
that-
give us their name, whoever's calling right now?
Yes.
That's something that we
It's
just...
Tim Timmons.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh no, we broke some HIPAA laws here.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm not a specialist in a particular like disorder. Like some people are eating disorder specialist or an addiction specialist or anxiety. My specialization is stage of life. So all the things that go with young adulthood of the what's next for me, where am I going in life, all the things that young adults often struggle with. That's kind of my gig.
Gosh. Layla, if you have any questions.
Are you taking patients?
Yes. He sees 7 a day, and then now he's going to have 3 more, which is
Right.
perfect.
Did you try to just pull yourself into the young adult category?
Wow. Chris. Yeah. Well, when I turned 30 last year,
Yeah.
I felt like it was the right thing for me to do
Yeah, do you, man?
to reach out to the younger folk.
Do you want to hear it?
No, you said something about your mustache earlier, and you were like, "It makes me feel my age."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What age does that make you?"
It's
feel?
true.
Ooh. What does it make you feel?
It
Good
makes
one.
me feel almost 40.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
How about that?
I know.
Gosh.
That's cool.
Which I think disqualifies me from a young adult.
Yeah, you look all of 48 right
Thanks,
now.
man.
Perfect.
Thanks.
If I tried to grow any kind of facial hair,
Yeah.
I would look like I was just, like.
Me right now.
No,
Yeah.
it would.
He looked over at you when he
He
said
did.
that.
I was like, I'll take that.
There's all kinds of words, but scraggly's the word. Like it would not look. It would not be a good look.
So if we talked to your wife and said, hey, could he try it for a month? What would she say?
She'd say you can try anything for a month.
Gosh.
Yeah.
We
But
should have her on here 'cause
It's not.
she is
Yeah. Ellen would be a
coolest human.
great guest here, but
Yeah.
no, she'd be fine. It's me. I would be like, oh my gosh,
Would you not feel like you were respectable? Or is
Right.
it just like,
nothing. It would
if
be
you
nothing.
didn't have a job,
There'd be nothing good about it.
Like me.
Nothing good about it. Like
if you were like Chris,
Nothing good going on. Like nothing there.
except for the stash.
you want to hear a Dave Verhaagan fun fact?
Yes.
So, in addition to being a therapist, I have always been interested in magic. And lately I've been like, you know what? I'm going to put some stuff out there. So I've been doing gigs around town.
Wow.
And I actually pinned down a show at a comedy club in the summer. And I'm doing a whole show in the
Oh
comedy
my
club.
God.
Isn't that cool?
In town?
In town.
This is your plug. What?
Let's go.
It's going to be,
Do we have a date?
It's August 24th, Third Coast Comedy Club. But I will tell you what, I am terrified and thrilled.
How long's your set?
Like an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
out of here. Kid you not.
75 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a long set.
They get
big boy
They
set.
give me 75 to 90. So I'm like,
I always give him a few minutes back just in case.
that's
but
right. That's right.
Man.
Isn't that cool?
That's
So-
really cool.
Mhm.
So now, do you call yourself, because in my favorite show, it's called an illusionist.
Illusion.
Illusions,
Oh, yeah,
Michael. Right.
I think you
are
should go
you
by
a
your
magician?
like natural Dutch name.
Verhaagen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ring to it when you throw a magician in
Something
there.
magical.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there really is.
I know.
That's
it's
dope.
strong. Yeah. I call myself the Great Timmons.
Oh my gosh! Please be your name. Please be the bill as the Great Timmons. But sir, your name's Dave Verhaagen. Yeah, I know. It's just a stupid name.
Yeah. The Great
I know a guy.
Timmons. Yeah. I did have a magic alter ego. When I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina,
Yeah.
I would do these little shows and I had a magic alter ego and I had a wig and I had fake mustache and
Okay.
big glasses and all this stuff.
Again, pointed
And my
right
name
at Chris.
Volt-
was the Righteous Raoul. The Righteous
Righteous-
Raoul.
Okay.
Yes.
How many gigs did
And
you get with
righteous
that
was
name?
not meant in the
That
churchy sense.
I
it was
went
meant
straight
in
to
the
1989 Southern Baptist, like Oklahoma.
no.
Yeah.
This
You
is
know what I
this
mean?
is like
Got
he
a
is a
weird spot.
righteous dude.
Wow.
I think you should bring that back in August.
I will send you a picture of
Righteous Raoul. That'll be in the show notes. Everybody.
Very
That'll be in the show notes for sure. Righteous Raoul.
Yeah. So now that undermined 100% of my credibility for whatever we're going to
No, I think you just boosted it.
Okay.
I think you totally
It's
boosted it.
one or the other.
Well, you haven't done any magic.
We'll
for
let
us
the-
yet.
We don't
let
know
the
if you're good or
audience
not,
decide.
to be honest.
You can't do magic on a podcast.
I
Does
don't.
anyone have a deck of
If you're good,
cards,
you
please?
could, but
I'd like to see.
Yeah, a deck of cards would be great. Okay, so we're just going to dive into some of our listeners' questions. I
Let's
just put this
do it.
out to our socials, what we like to call social
What
medias.
the kids these
What the
days.
kids call the social medias.
Mhm.
And we just got some great questions. And you can answer these quick. We can kind of jump through them. We can sit on them for a long time. But I think everybody's going to get something out of all of these.
We'll see.
We'll see. Okay. I'm a survivor of trauma and abuse. This is the first one.
Big shift of
dive
gears
in.
here. Yes,
Here
we're
we
diving
go.
in. Here we go.
My boyfriend is the absolute best. We've been together for 9 months. How do I trust that he will continue to treat me well when no one has ever done that? I have no frame of reference for what it looks like to have someone be good to me unless they need something. I love this man. I trust this man. I want to believe I deserve to be treated well.
Wow.
Again, the question that we asked on socials was, what question would you ask a therapist about relational things?
Yeah.
So that's
Wow. What a great question.
Yeah.
Whoever this is, thank you so much. This is a fantastic question. So this could be our whole podcast, just this one. We'll see where it goes. Anytime someone has experienced significant trauma, it's disruptive to almost every part of their life. And sometimes we call things that aren't really traumas trauma. You know, we like, oh, I lost my luggage. It's so traumatic. Or I got embarrassed in front of class. It's so traumatic. When we're talking about trauma in the way that she's describing, we're talking about really like deep stuff that affects how you think, how you feel, how you see yourself, how you see other relationships. And almost always there's some kind of impact on how you form relationships and attach to people. So I'm going to make a little sideways leap here into this concept called attachment style. And I think this will help what she's referring to or what she's asking about. And by the way, this is research that's been around for 60 years. And there are 4 attachment styles. And this is how humans relate to other people that are very close to them. It's not just how you socialize. It's not just how you are kind of interact. It's really about your partner, your child, your parent, whomever. We've studied this from the time kids are infants all the way up. And there seems to be really 4 consistent styles. They're going to make perfect sense. It really is not super complicated. The first one's called a secure style. And it's what it sounds like. So a person that's securely attached to other people, they think if I am in a partner relationship, that's great. If I'm not, I'm okay in and of myself. You know, I don't have to have a relationship to feel like a complete person. And when
they're secure in and of themselves. They've received enough security
early on, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And you're getting right there to the heart of it. And so that person, when they're in a relationship, they don't play games. Things are straightforward. They handle conflict as directly as possible, right? And that's about 50% of the population. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And these are all on spectrums.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. That would be a good way to think about it. But the other 2, and I'll leave the 4th one is I'll have a passing kind of reference to that. But the other 2 are kind of the mirror opposites. And one is called an insecure or anxious style. Sometimes, people call it a preoccupied style. You'll hear different names for it. And we're going to talk about partner relationships in particular. We're going to keep it focused on that. When they're not in a relationship, they really, really want to be in a relationship. They feel like they need the relationship. They need to be with somebody. And when they're in it, they're just eaten up with insecurity and worry, and they worry that their partner's going to leave them or cheat on them. They're always like, let me see your text, who you've been talking to, what about this person at work, and all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of emotionality, and there's a lot of kind of clingy stuff around it.
Yeah.
And then the mirror opposite of that is the person that when they get in a relationship, they start to find fault, they start to create distance, they push away. And we call that an avoidant style or a dismissive style. Here's the fascinating stuff. Those 2, one is like, come here, I need you. This one's get away from me.
Yep.
They're the same thing. And one is a fight response and one's a flight response.
Okay.
And they're both responses to feeling anxious about the relationship. The first one, the premise in that person's head is, I am not okay and I need another person. The other one, the second one, the avoidance style is, I'm good. I can take care of my life. You represent some kind of threat to me.
So I'm done, walled up.
I will back away, right? Now, the fourth style, and sometimes people who have trauma histories are the fourth style, which is sometimes called a disorganized style, because it means it sort of vibrates back and forth between those things. It's like, come here, get away, I can't do that kind of thing. I would say exactly what you said. They're all things that are on a relative continuum, right? They move up and down. You can be kind of mostly secure, but in a bad day, get a little more avoidant.
Yeah.
Or in a bad relationship, or you get the idea.
Yep.
These are not things that you get to be 27 years old and develop. These are things that the hints of them are early on. And then trauma is like a big just hand grenade into this. So all that's a big wind up to say to this question. All right, imagine that you're growing up kid, you experienced trauma. You've never had that base of trust in the relationship. And so there's a part of you that's like, I really want this, but I'm scared of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be this sort of distancing or pushing off or away. So to the point, what do you do? First is expose it, put it out there, talk about it, learn about it. The best text out there is a book called Attached. It's very accessible. You could pick it up at any bookstore. And it takes this idea, which is all this sort of scientific research, and boils it down to very practical. You can take inventories. And this is not by the way, pop psychology. This is the deal.
Yeah.
This is real stuff. And then learn about that, because the more you see your own dynamic happening and you're like, oh, this is pushing that button.
Yeah.
And it's making me anxious. And so I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so I'm going to kind of wall myself up. They did a number of studies. One that was fascinating to me is they had a person that had an anxious, insecure attachment, person with a more avoidant, dismissive attachment. And then they wired them up to biofeedback. And they, as a couple, had them have conflict and observed them. All the biofeedback measures were the same. They're both feeling the same thing. This one's more getting I need this to work and stay with me, and the other
clingy.
one's get away from me, right? And if you think about, they're both fear, anxiety. One is the flight, get away, and one is the I'm going to fight, right? The more you can understand that dynamic, especially when you've had a trauma history, the more you can kind of say, this is what's happening in the moment. It's this button that's getting pushed.
This is where I'm going.
Right. The last thing I'll say before, I'd love to hear your feedback or questions about it, is the question underneath all that is about trust. And trust is not an on-off switch. Trust is also on a continuum, and it's actually a multi-dimensional continuum. What I mean is, did you drive here today?
Yes.
You had to trust that people coming towards you on Wilson Pike were not going to swerve in your lane, or
Stay
you
on
would
their
not
side.
have gotten.
Right.
So at some level, you trust that human. Now, you don't trust that person with your bank account. You don't trust that person with your deepest stuff, but you trust that person.
Yeah.
Trust is not you trust, you don't trust. We trust people in certain circumstances, with certain things, certain professions. We trust to do certain tasks well. In a relationship, it's the same idea, is that you can trust on, I totally trust this person to be good with our kids, but I don't trust them with money or whatever it might be. And so some of it is just recognizing there's a nuance to trust too. There's a complexity to it. And just in what ways are you not trusting? And how much of that's your stuff, and then how much of that is based on.
Right. So for this person, one of your questions is on this attachment styles, which do you kind of lean to? And the other one would be, which even more practical might even be, where is it in your relationship that you don't feel trust?
Yeah. What's pushing the buttons? If you're finding that you're tending to go this way or that way, then okay, know that, but then what's pushing that button, right? What makes you begin to pull back? and then how much of that is you and your stuff and your history so that you can kind of own it, and then how much of it is just what happened. And that's very hard to do sometimes because it's being run through a filter, but even posing those questions to yourself, what's great about that question is there's an awareness there that is fantastic. It's like whoever wrote that is already steps ahead because they've got an awareness that they've got some stuff that they're bringing into a relationship that they need to understand how to own.
Sometimes we just call like, oh, my dog. Well, this is just true. I'll be real honest. Lucy took 2 dumps yesterday under my bed.
She's mad at you, man.
And she she hides, and I've got trauma. I mean, that's, I'm feeling like trauma is.
Got an anger response coming up.
I do. I'm fighting. I'm flighting. I'm doing all the things. Versus this woman who's got major abuse and trauma in her background. So is trauma on a continuum? I mean, what is your definition of trauma? Is actually my question.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you said that. This is probably the most controversial thing I will say today. Maybe not. We'll see.
I hope not.
But I actually don't think the movement to classify all unpleasant things as trauma is in any way helpful. I don't think that's good for us because there are definitely things that I'll give you a working definition of it that I think are traumas, but it's gotten so sort of broadened out that anything that's like, my boss embarrassed me in a meeting, it's so traumatic. I've had trauma, It's like, I'm not going to argue that that's unpleasant or that that's bad.
Right.
But I think once we kind of start putting everything into that bucket, man, it really dilutes it. And if I were someone in this woman's shoes, I wouldn't want someone who lost their luggage at the airport or had a dog take a dump under their bed to use the same association with that. So yes, to continuum, but also I think there needs to be some boundary about what we're even considering that. And so the professional definition of it is anything that is experienced as potentially life-threatening or threatening to the integrity of your body. If you're in a car accident, if you've been sexually assaulted, if you've experienced war, and it doesn't always have to happen to you. You could be in war, in combat, and see someone else shot or killed otherwise in front of you, and that could be incredibly traumatic.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things would be the definition of trauma. Other things, I think we're kind of our language, it's a languaging issue. Some of it's just we don't have a language for it, for some things that are they're bad things.
Yeah.
Things that affect people.
Right.
I'm not dismissing that.
Right. They still suck. They're still bad things.
Yeah, they're still bad things.
Harmful, hurtful things.
Yeah.
But maybe not trauma.
Right. And I think other people would argue, and I wouldn't fight them on that, although, I like to fight.
Yeah.
But
Verhaagan.
Yeah. I would be okay with accepting like verbal abuse in the true abusive sense as being a form of trauma. That to me would be an okay way of thinking about it. But again, not just we had arguments or we said things that we didn't mean or took back, but really where someone is truly abusing. Any kind of abuse, I think, is fair game to call trauma.
So I have a question. It's not necessarily traumas that are informing insecure or other types of attachment styles.
Correct.
Because when you said 50% of people have secure attachments, I was like, oh, they've had perfect childhoods. But that's not necessarily what that means.
No.
It's a great question.
It's a perfect question. So yeah, trauma is not the only variable for, like, all of us have attachment style. All 4 of us at the table have some. If we were to get it assessed, we'd be able to be like, all right, we're here on this continuum of attachment style. And that's formed by 2 big things. One is how you're wired, right? And that's your temperament. Before your personality comes your temperament. You have, 27 kids or so? How many kids do you have?
Yes, 13.
13 kids, yes. So you have baby 1, baby 2. This baby sleeps through the night, regular, easygoing. This one's fussy, doesn't sleep. This one walks up to people as a toddler. This one holds onto your leg, won't separate for preschool. This kid is moody. This kid's not, et cetera.
Did Hillary give you a whole rundown?
Yeah, she
That was awkward.
she emailed me all
she
the.
totally-
Hillary sent some questions of her own in. We're going to get to those in just a second.
So that's all temperament. So you take your temperament and then you take your life experiences and you mash them together. And so the reason that's important is because one life experience for me might have different meaning than it might for you, because I might interpret it differently based on whether I'm more easily embarrassed, socially awkward, whatever it might be. You know, I had a client, and I can say this because he was in a different state. He'll never hear this.
What's his name?
I'm going to say his name is Timmons.
Oh,
But
Classy guy.
I'm gonna get there.
he is very classy.
Yeah.
But he was in a paintball game with some friends when he was, I think, in middle school, and some older kids ambushed him, and they got him in the corner, and they got him. Well, and they thought it was hilarious. And for some kids, they would think it was hilarious. For him, this was a life-altering moment. Like this was like it made him terrified of it altered his, because the meaning of it was very different. So attachment comes out of that. Is even if you have great families, great parents, great everything, but your temperament is difficult and hard, you might have a harder time making a connection even with a parent. All the time you'll hear parents say, we just love this kid, we try it, we're for him, and he thinks we're awful. You know, that's something that's more about how that kid's wired early on and how he perceived or takes in those kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So the overlay is the trauma, right? That's the part where we toss the hand grenade in it and it blows stuff up. So you could have a kid that was securely attached, but then has this incredibly awful, let's say, abuse experience. Well, you think, what does that do? Well, this person was in a position of trust and maybe authority, and can I trust people? And I mean, it just does a number on you with that. Great question.
Ooh, I've got so many questions off
Go
of that.
ask them.
I want to keep moving on this.
Right.
Dang it. How do I navigate disappointment and resentments in my relationships in a healthy way? I deal with that. I don't know many people that don't deal with that.
I'm not trying to be dodgy, but do you have an initial thought of how you would respond to that?
How do I navigate disappointment and resentments in my relationships in a healthy way?
I've got a couple thoughts, but I'm very curious.
No, I mean,
what's percolating in your
resonate
head.
with that. I think that's something that I deal with. That is one of the things that I deal with on my side of the court in relationships. It can be mostly in my more intimate relationships is disappointment and resentments. One of the things that I've done in the past is I'll go, okay, I'm just going to take it, whatever it is. I'm just going to take it and I'll serve, but I'm not really serving. I'm resenting.
Yeah.
So I saw that question. I'm like, I don't know how to work through resentments.
Chris, any thoughts?
I think I'm probably weighing the relationship. If Verhaagan lets me down, I don't care that much. We just met today.
And you said my name wrong, so
Yeah, Verhaagan.
No.
It was a mixture of it was pretty close. See, so I let him down. Now he
you
didn't
did.
care.
Now I'm
Right?
very, very bitter and resentful.
Right? Now, if you let me down, I might care a little bit more than that. If my wife does that, then maybe it's hit me in a different way. It might also depend on like past, let's not call them traumas, let's call them disappointments or things. So if this is something that's like come up over and over again, if we've been through it on it, then I think you're like constantly weighing what it is and who it is and how much of it all in one, and then trying to make some sort of path forward or not. And so that's the first thing I thought of, well, like, who is it? Because I've had relationships in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm going to quickly analyze this and decide if this is a relationship I'm going to keep.
Right.
Right? And how much value do I put into this relationship? Do I want to still be this person's friend? I've got relationships with just friends and acquaintances that I'll put effort into. I've got relationships with really close family members that we've put so much into, and there's been so much disappointment that I finally said, I'm good. And that was the only way forward.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been different for me with different people at different times.
Do you have any thoughts, Layla?
Yeah, I think that this question is really challenging, and not to be dramatic, but feels encompassing of like maybe the largest fight that I have day to day with relationships and people is just really thinking about how do I relate to others and how does this person not only delight me, but then on the flip side, disappoint me. Feels like that's the sort of like spectrum it
Good.
isolates between. But when Chris was talking, it just makes me think about almost the dangers of wading into the territory of, well, if this person is disappointing me or not someone who I see as safe, then it's just best to seclude myself from them and put boundaries into place. But then at what point do boundaries become something that hold us back from the hard but beautiful parts of relationship? Can we have relationships that are intimate without disappointment? I think is really the question that I have.
Yeah, good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah, the reason I especially wanted to hear from you was how complicated this is and how probably universal it is. I was reflecting on it for myself when you guys were talking too, and thinking, I haven't had a lot of really deep disappointments in my relationships until recent years, interestingly. And most of those have been work related, professionally related, less so about family but some friendships that are tied to work, some other non-friendships that are tied to work. And it's been, it's been tough. So a couple thoughts come to my mind, and I'm going to just say this as a fellow journeyman on this rather than somebody that like I've got it nailed. There's a concept that comes, the word is a philosophy word, but it's out of psychology. It's called dialectical. And dialectical is the ability to hold two competing ideas at once. That's what you were just talking about, that continuum or that sort of range. And it has helped me a lot to go, if I say, is this person awesome and amazing and beautiful and a phenomenal person? Yes. And has this person disappointed me and acted selfishly and been what I perceive to be in the wrong? Yes. Rather than I have to kind of polarize
all bad, all good.
Right. Once I start polarizing it, then it's like, if I go over here, then I'm not allowing myself to really reckon with what happened. And if I go over here, I'm just going to sit in this sort of stew and this resentment.
So good.
There are a lot of places where psychology and faith overlap, but this is one, is that I would never, ever, in my work, I don't tell somebody you need to forgive that person. I don't say that. But what I will say is, what we know is that when you work toward that, it's better for you. And so even if you can't get there for them, sometimes you need to get there for you. What's happening in that moment with those resentments is that we're becoming attached to something. We're becoming attached to a justice ideal or a way things should be. And I'm using the word attached now differently than we talked about in the first question, but we're becoming attached to that thing. And this is where, and this isn't contradictory to what we talked about with attachment stuff. This is where we practice non-attachment, right? That's the healthy place to get to, is to not be attached to the idea that this is unjust and unfair and I was wrongly treated.
Does that mean that you are not letting it change your identity and how you see yourself and how
Partly.
you see? Is that what that means?
It means partly that. So this is tied to a bigger idea called radical acceptance, which is what it sounds like. And that is...
That's what I feel like with Chris, just as his friend.
Right.
You know, it's
constant radical acceptance.
I assume that.
I wrote a song called Radical.
Did you?
Yeah,
You
just
texted
just
to
for
me.
my
It's-
friendship.
Yeah.
Man, I'm
Got
a good friend.
on my wall.
You're so good.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, the radical acceptance is where you, by choice, deliberately, not by instinct or spontaneously, make a decision to accept things as they are and not as they should be.
I like that.
And it's very powerful and it's very active. It's not passive, like, what are you going to do? It's not throwing up your hands. It's not sort of like giving things a pass. You can still say something's wrong. You can still say somebody hurt you. You can still say you have feelings about it. But radical acceptance is where you say, this is reality, and a reality I can do nothing about. And I'll either get stuck on it and wrapped around the axle and not be able to get dislodged from that.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to practice radical acceptance, which is I accept that that is what's happened and how it is. That's been one of the most powerful things for me. The times when I've found myself dealing, even in more recent years, with resentments, I have to be like, I need to practice that. That is a mental discipline for me to practice.
That's mystifying to me. Just I hear you talk about it. Is that radical acceptance of someone if they've hurt you? How does that sort of
Totally. My same
reconcile
What's next?
the tension I feel with if someone's wronged me, or if I'm in, let's say, an abusive situation? I think that's probably a more extreme, maybe clear way of not exercising acceptance, but
Right.
can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, good question. So I would never tell somebody, and in fact, I tell them the opposite. I wouldn't say, if you're in an abusive situation, accept it, and it's sort of like, shut up and take it. I mean, that's awful. So please hear that's nowhere close to what this is talking about. But if someone's hurt you and you have some agency in that where you're not just staying in an abusive relationship, you're not staying in a bad situation for you, the acceptance part is to practice deliberately accepting the pieces of it that you have no control over, which has to do with 100% of how they perceive things and think of things and act. You have no control over that. And so whether it's right or wrong or just or unjust or anything like that, you could be 100% right. You could have been hurt and the other person might be 100% wrong. But you staying stuck on that does nothing but harm you. And the acceptance is to accept that there's harm that's been done, it affects you, and you accept that. It doesn't mean you say it's okay, you give it a pass. It doesn't mean anything like that. And that's where sometimes it gets confused, is that it sounds like you're saying, it's all right. That's not acceptance. Acceptance can still be, I was wrong, this person harmed me, and I accept that is what happened and I can't do anything about, so that allows you then to kind of move forward.
Is it a healthy first step?
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a healthy first step.
I think that's a great way to say it. Yeah, it's not the end of the story. In fact, the therapy that is based on this is called acceptance and commitment therapy. The commitment word's a little tricky, but what it means is I accept a crappy situation, a crappy experience, a crappy emotion, and I commit in that to living the life that I need to live, despite that. It's sort of like a moving through that rather than getting stuck in it.
Yep.
Right? It's saying, this is good for you as the person who's received this bad thing to not get hung up on it because it's robbing you of your life.
Gosh, how do you do that? Because those things, I mean, I just think of like Keeler and I's relationship or my kids or whatever, that these things happen. It's like, okay, I can stop. I can take a step back.
Yeah.
Can radically accept that this is what it is. And good, bad split. She's got good in her and bad stuff. I've got good in me and I've got bad stuff in me as well.
Yeah.
But then I think that's where, again, resentment, I hold on to the thing going, but this thing still happened and we still haven't resolved this thing.
So I have 2 points about that.
Come on
now. One is, this is not something that you should expect in a moment, or it's not a moment of insight. It's like, oh, now I get it. Now I'm done. This is an active kind of working out of things, right? And the other piece is, it isn't all or nothing. Like, you don't accept all things, even in a situation. There are some things that you still have some, well, I'll say agency in, or that need to be worked out. Then do that as much as you can, right? It's not a like, what are you going to do? Move on.
Yeah.
There are aspects of this that you have agency in and that you can do something about. And then there's, to be honest, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. It's what happened, or it's how this person perceives it. And you're like, that's insane. How could they see it that way? That's crazy.
Yeah.
And you're like wanting them to see it differently, and you'll never get there.
To be in a healthy relationship, does that have to be reciprocated? Do both people need to be doing the same work?
It's better to. I don't know if it has to be, but it's better to. Yeah.
Because I could imagine those scenarios which you're trying to work through this resentment and the other person is not, right? There's no problem there. And so you keep butting up against the same issue over and over again.
Yes.
Then your relationship just stalls, whether it's a marriage or a friendship or anything.
And again, I'm not trying to make this too circular an argument, but that's where you go to acceptance.
Yeah.
Right. That's part of the acceptance too, is that this person and I are not aligned in that there is a problem, or that they see it so differently, so fundamentally differently. And, you can make efforts to be like, let's see a counselor. Let's go through this book together. Let's have more conversation. Great. But at some point, I mean, any goal that involves another person behaving differently is a bad goal.
Yeah.
You know?
So true.
I've got another question about forgiveness because you mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to lay all my cards on the table because why not?
Why
It's
not?
The internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
Sorry, Mom. So my relationship with my brother is not good. We haven't talked in a long time. I actually, the last time I went to my therapist, who we've had on here before, he's a stud. The relationship with my brother basically got to a point where I'm like done, and I'm okay with it. Like to a point where I actually don't think I'm capable of forgiveness, and that actually I'm at peace with it. And so, like it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
So I went to my therapist because I've grown up in the church, and I lay out the whole situation and this type of thing. And I'm like, I don't think I'm ever going to forgive my brother, and I'm actually okay with it. And my life was pretty good. Should I feel bad about this? You know? And because it's just this whole weird faith thing and all of these things we've been told. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, if I just take a step back, you know, and I think I probably radically accepted the situation for what it is.
Yes.
And then said, well, I'm good. I'm good where we are.
Yeah.
What? I don't even know really what the question is. What do you say to that? And like, is forgiveness needed in that? I've always thought of forgiveness as something more for me than the other person anyways.
Sure. Do you mind telling us briefly what the response was to that question in therapy?
To him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said I was all right.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is this is one of the reasons why you don't have two therapists.
Yeah.
Is because you might have people pull you in different directions.
Sure.
I actually align with that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that's what I would say is that's okay. I don't have, I would not try to push you to a place. I've had plenty of people who have made good faith efforts to work out relationships, and they've gotten to a place of like, this is not a good relationship for me. I'm okay with it. They've done their work on it and they move on. Obviously, it'd be great if we all had great relationships with every family member and everyone that has hurt us or we've hurt. But again, I'm going to own this as an opinion. I think it's totally okay for you to have done your work on it and then go, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I think that's actually probably the healthier place to be. I've seen a lot of people get so tangled up in I've got one guy that he keeps desperately wanting his relationship with his mom. He's an adult to be better. And I've never met her, seems incapable of change. And it's very hurtful. And he keeps going back to that well and keeps getting smacked. And his work is going to need to get to, I don't have to go back there.
Yeah.
Right. The nuance I would add, and I'm not saying this about this situation per se, but the nuance I would add is one of the things I think is really wise that comes from Al-Anon. And Al-Anon's the support for people who love someone who has an addiction.
Yep.
Their sort of principle is engage when you can and disengage when you must. And I like it because it leaves it as a dynamic process rather than and sometimes you need in a relationship for it to be settled and done. And other times it's like, I think at some level I'd be okay with this working out. And so you kind of tip back in and like, nope. And right. And
That's so good.
It has this sort of dynamic quality to it where you can allow yourself time where you're like, I'm just in this space now where I can't be with that person. I can't pursue this person. I can't have, fine, be there.
Yeah.
That's good. And then other times you're like, I think I might be able to be there. I have one relationship in my life right now where right now I'm okay with it. It's super complicated. Again, it's one of the work situations, but if that person came to me and had done some work on themselves and had been able to own some things where part of this for me is that I feel like this person hurt other people that I care about and never has owned that.
Yeah.
But let's say that got his head around that, then I feel like that maybe we could have a dialogue. But as it is now, then 10 years from now, we haven't spoken, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I just wonder if the word forgiveness might be the wrong word.
Yeah.
Like that you don't forgive him. I just wonder, I'm curious.
No, but I think for me, I chose it right because I think there's some things he did that I won't forgive him for. In the real sense, like the biblical, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good and maybe, I don't know, maybe I need more therapy.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, you think of like those cases of like real abuse.
Yeah, I mean, we've been on many walks and talked about these things.
Or if someone's been assaulted or those things, it's like, and I've seen the good news, Instagrams of the families who've like forgiven the person for killing their kids. I'm like, nah, I don't think so. Maybe that's my own issue, but
I do think for some people, if they're wanting to move toward that, then I would support as a therapist. But if someone's been abused by someone else,
it's not like the goal we all have to get to.
I am not going to put that on the table as like, you really need to work toward forgiveness of that person. I think that's a really yuck message. If they come to a place of saying, this will be good for me, then count me in on that. But that's a toughie. You look like you have something to say.
I think it was helpful, Chris, for you to give such a specific example, because obviously I'm listening and thinking of all of the people in my life. Maybe Tim, Dave, people are surfacing for you as well. It's hard for me to want to know the Jesus way of responding, right? Of like, well, you can tell me, I can go to my therapist, I can listen to different people and feel like I need to do what's best for me. And maybe that's not going back or investing in a relationship that has been hurtful or abusive or whatever it is. And I still feel like the pull or the tension around, well, is this what God would want for me? Like maybe it's the guilt of being raised in the church and made to feel a certain way that isn't true. Maybe God would want me to live in a healthy way, which is not forgiving or doing whatever. So it's just complex. So
for sure.
I mean, radical acceptance in this is accepting as they are, not as they should be. I mean, I'm going into my own story with that. There are things that I am still so sad about in, one of the relationships that you know about, Chris. Yeah, there's almost a sobriety that I'm hoping I get at some point of just like, oh, okay, how sad. Like that I could step back, look at it in a glass box, and just observe it with radical acceptance and go, this sucks.
Yeah.
That, what he did, she did, totally sucks. There's nothing good. I'll never say, oh, it's okay. There's nothing okay about what happened.
Yeah.
But it's this stepping back, just kind of going, and that's their story. And I'm just so sad for them. And that sucks.
Yeah.
And what a jerk.
So I guess there is a reality in which there could still be a future, but it's just not going to be the same. And it may not be the picture that you had for it.
Well, what was the Al-Anon line?
You engage when you can and disengage when you must.
Yeah. I think when I think about relationships, I think we put expectations on all of our relationships, right? And when those expectations aren't met, those are the disappointments and those are the resentments. And so part of moving forward in a relationship is radical acceptance of what is, and then adjusting to the different reality against our expectation. And can we deal with that? And if we can, we have a relationship. And if we can't, we don't.
I keep thinking about Dallas Willard line, and I don't know what to do with this conversation. His understanding of seeking first the kingdom of God, not my kingdom or our queendoms,
Queendom.
And his thing is, if we were to live fully present, this is utopian almost, but the aim that the kingdom of God is the only thing worth seeking first, and mine is just not worth seeking. That we could live unoffendable lives. That was his line that is just, it sticks with me all the time. Like, what would it look like to live an unoffendable life where my kingdom is not worth protecting and I don't know how to put these two together. This will be.
I get that. And I think it's aspirational. I think that is a very good aspirational idea.
Yeah.
It's where it rubs up against real life.
Reality. Yeah, for sure.
But I do think the notion of that, of like, I want to be so sort of emptied of my own stuff and expectations and agenda that I'm kind of untouchable in that way in terms of being hurt the way we're talking about. Great. But we live very messy lives.
This makes me think about like 2020 and just the mess of that was to like every interpersonal relationship.
Yeah.
Because everyone just picked a side, at some point. And even if you were trying not to, I feel like we tried to ride some like middle ground, on stuff, but we lost friends. And especially weirdly, like in the Christian music thing, it was like people were going on sides. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that guy's that, or this, I'm this. I guess I'm not going to be their friend anymore, Yeah. And so I wonder if it's okay or maybe I've thought about it this way, and this is how I've reconciled some of those relationships going away. Not that I'm like resentful against somebody that is just incompatible with me, but like, oh, maybe I'm not that person's person, but there's another person out there for them, whether that's, whatever kind of relationship that is. And I think that's been an interesting kind of angle that I haven't thought much about, but I think I've done that with some friends where it's like, oh, we're just not going to be best friends. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because I actually, through this process, I've really figured out who I am.
Refined, yeah.
And I'm okay with that and feeling good. And so it gives you a little bit more clearer picture of who you're actually going to connect with. And then it gives those people an opportunity to find their people.
Yeah.
Just a interesting insight on that, because it was crazy.
It's good stuff.
One more question?
Sure.
It said, I know being triggered has become a bit cliche, but why do I get triggered so easily these days with loved ones, friends, and other random people?
It's great.
Do you have just a quick thought on that?
I have a couple of quick thoughts. Okay. I do think there's an answer to it. What Chris was talking about, I think, is part of the answer, which is we are just getting shellacked with overload of negative stuff. And the idea that the world's worse than it ever has been before is actually false. Violent crime is not up. Kids are not doing worse than before, although in terms of mental health, arguably they are. But in terms of their behavior, all the things that we hear, they're not true. But man, we're just getting pow, 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 pow. So then you have this experience of this collective trauma. And here's one way we can call this a trauma. Is this COVID thing was just an absolute boot to the head for all of us.
Yep.
And it blew up relationships, and it blew up, organizations, and all kinds of things. And so I think we're on the other side of that, and we're just a bit fried. And at the same time, we're still getting bombarded with all that information. If we're talking about why, I think that's a big piece of it. The part I'd add, the little twist I would add, is the part where I disagree about how this is getting discussed culturally is that we need to avoid being triggered.
I love that.
Yeah. There is sort of an assumption that any being triggered is bad.
Yeah.
And what we know about dealing with trauma, dealing with anxiety, dealing with anything like that is the more you avoid things that upset you, the more vulnerable you are and the more weak you are emotionally. And the more you sort of face and expose yourself and push into that, the better. So I'm not saying the solution is to doom scroll more,
right?
But I am saying the idea that anything that upsets you must be avoided is wrongheaded and actually undermines you. It weakens you. To be a resilient person, it's the same way. Like, how do you become a physically strong person?
Right.
You don't avoid lifting weight.
Yeah.
To become a physically strong person, you lift weight, and you increasingly lift weight. It's the same thing true emotionally. If your whole MO is to say, I will avoid anything that feels weighty, heavy, upsetting, triggering, man, you are just incredibly vulnerable. And my argument is a lot of the reason why we're seeing increases in mental health problems with younger generations, part is the whole cell phone, social media exposure, all the things that's another whole conversation. That's part of it. And there are a couple other cultural factors, but another part of it is that they've been so generationally protected from hardship.
Dang it.
That when it happens, I had a guy tell me, it just always sticks in my head. He had a breakup and then got suicidal, and fortunately he's doing fine. But I said, why do you think that hit you so hard? He said, I've never had anything bad happen to me.
Shoot.
He's 20, whatever at the time, 22, 23 years old at the time. I've never had anything bad happen to me. Well, I mean, that makes the point right there.
Yeah.
It's like something that's a normal part of the human experience was an absolute devastation for him. We don't do ourselves any favors by avoiding anything that triggers us.
Right. That is so good, Dave.
To that point, when we're talking about trauma and even how you were classifying it at the beginning of the conversation, does this generation then, a breakup, is that trauma if there, by definition, has not been an experience?
I think they might talk about it like trauma.
Okay.
We might, and again, it might be just a semantics or a languaging thing,
Sure.
but it also, to me, is important because there are people that have had some real trauma that I want to respect in how we think about this and talk and Having a breakup is in the normal band. Like a trauma by definition is going to be outside the normal band of human experience.
Wow.
Right? That's what a trauma is. Other people may have had that experience, but it's not what, you don't go through everyday life and get into a car accident where you shatter your bones. You don't go through everyday life and get assaulted. You don't go through, those are things that are outside of normal human experience. A breakup is a thing that most people have experienced in their life. It's hard. It's awful. I tell my clients that is something that is one of the hardest things you can go through that of a normal experience, because you love this person, you care about them, you see your future with them. And then it's like, right. And I love this generation. I do. But everything becomes a trauma. I'm not trying to, I hope I'm not coming across as minimizing that, but I also think it's important because if we're going to get this generation to a better place, we're not going to get them to a better place by helping them avoid being triggered and helping them avoid anything that's hard. Like you want your kid, I hate to say it like this, but you want them to have a breakup and to fail a test and to not get into the college they wanted to go into. And not always, but some. You want that as a parent for your kid so that they develop the resiliency that life requires of them.
So good. I mean, I don't parent like that, but I'm sure other people do. You know what I mean? So really, my kids had a hard time choosing a movie last night, and I tried to come in and help them not be triggered.
And when Chase wouldn't eat his dinner last night, and it turned into World War IV.
Yeah.
I handled it well.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah,
We could tell. Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much.
I'll come back anytime.
Verhaagan. Thanks, dude.
Thanks.
Well, I hope you loved that. If your question was not answered, I might be doing another one just after this series is done. Probably at the end of the summer, I might do a few more of these question answer podcasts just for fun, just as little bonuses. So I'll try to answer them then. If you've enjoyed this series, then would you let us know? If you want to subscribe or just comment, has an episode helped you out specifically? Let us know that. Go to our Facebook page, Facebook group page, and let us know the things that have been helping you. It's so encouraging to hear from you. I love being on the road and people come up and go, oh my gosh, I'm one of your listeners and this was my favorite episode, or I've learned this, or so thanks you guys. Thank you for listening. And our next episode is our season finale. So you don't want to miss that one. So subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. And if it's helped you, let a friend know. And then whatever you learned today, let's put these things into practice, and not for God, but put them into practice with Jesus all week long. Thanks, you guys.